You had one of your own presenters on Twitter pen an apology for not following up on one of the contributors talking about how we should have more sympathy because the victims were blonde and blue-eyed, right? And so the very fact that one of your presenters is apologising on Twitter shouldn't be forgotten about, right? Because you're covering another aspect when it comes to race.
And I don't think anybody is saying it should be forgotten about. But what I'm saying is that we have been investigating this, and I just wonder, reflecting on our coverage of Afghanistan, when the Taliban took control again, and the amount of coverage that we gave to that, it is commensurate to the amount of coverage that we are giving here in Ukraine as well. I'm just looking at, different sets of circumstances, but circumstances in which people are being forced to leave the home that they have known for most of their lives.
Absolutely. But it's the language. And I don't want to single out the BBC. I didn't come on to talk about the BBC. I came on to talk about the general journalistic coverage. Right? And the general journalistic coverage is that we're seeing examples of people saying these are relatively civilised Europeans when they're referencing Ukrainian victims. As if somehow that they're different from other conflicts. We've had people talking about them, we should have sympathy because they're blonde and blue-eyed. We've had people saying this isn't a third world country, despite the fact, as if this makes it slightly different, despite the fact that if you look at the GDP per capita of Ukraine, it falls well below Jamaica, Namibia, Lebanon, and nobody ever says they're people like us when they're referring to African countries and then refer to the GDP of that country. Right, and so these are dog whistles.
So you want the media broadly to talk about the significance of this in the context of the fact that we have a global superpower, Russia, and the impact that this conflict could have for the rest of the world.
And where we have sympathy for the victims, and we have to have sympathy for the victims, right, we don't have undue sympathy for the Ukrainian victims more so than other conflicts. The victims of all wars are absolutely terrible. And we need to have sympathy for the victims of all the wars, right? And we shouldn't conflate that sympathy, whether we should have more or less sympathy for those victims, because the actual conflict may be more or less important